The silence in Richard Davenport's study was the kind that sucked the air from your lungs. It was a heavy, expensive silence, insulated by mahogany bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that had never been opened, and thick Persian rugs that swallowed sound. For 10 years, that silence had been a backdrop to my life, a brief respite between the joyous chaos of raising Liam and Maya. Now it was a weapon. Cynthia Davenport sat behind the grand desk, her fingers steepled, a posture she'd likely copied from a magazine article about power poses. She wore a cream-colored silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Richard, her husband, stood by the window, staring out at the manicured lawns I knew like the back of my hand. He'd always been a man of grand gestures and absent details, perfectly comfortable outsourcing his fatherhood to me. "Sarah," Cynthia began, her voice smooth and cool as marble. "As you know, Liam is now 16 and Maya is 14. They're practically adults." I nodded, my heart starting a slow, painful thud against my ribs. I knew this day was coming, of course. Children grow up. Nannies become redundant. But I'd foolishly imagined it would be different with them, with us. I hadn't just been an employee. I'd been the one who taught Maya to tie her shoes, who held Liam's hand during his first trip to the ER for stitches, who knew their secret fears and their wildest dreams. "We feel it's time for a change," she continued, avoiding my gaze. "The children need a different kind of influence now, someone who can help them navigate the social intricacies of their world. Prep schools, Ivy League applications, that sort of thing." The unspoken words hung in the air. Someone better than you. Someone from our world. I was just Sarah, the girl from a working-class Ohio town who'd put her own college dreams on hold. For 10 years, I'd poured every ounce of my love and energy into their children. I'd read them to sleep, cooked their favorite meals, and celebrated their victories as if they were my own. In return, I was given a generous salary and a small apartment over the garage, a gilded cage where I was always on call, but never truly part of the family. "Of course," I managed, my voice sounding distant. "I understand." Richard finally turned from the window. He had the kind of handsome, forgettable face that belonged on a billboard for a regional bank. "We've prepared a severance package for you, Sarah. It's quite generous. 3 months' pay. And a sterling letter of recommendation, of course." He slid a thick envelope across the desk. It felt like a consolation prize for a decade of my life. "We'll need you to vacate the apartment by the end of the week," Cynthia added, her tone brisk and final. "The new governess, a wonderful woman from Switzerland, will be arriving on Monday." The end of the week, 4 days, a cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just my job, it was my home, my life. The worst part came a few minutes later. They had instructed me not to make a scene with the children. "It's better this way," Cynthia had said. A clean break. I found Liam in the library, struggling with a calculus problem. He looked up, his face breaking into the familiar, easy grin I'd known since he was 6. "Hey, Sarah, can you look at this? It's killing me." My heart fractured. I couldn't tell him. I couldn't break his heart and watch the confusion cloud his eyes. So I smiled, my face feeling like a porcelain mask, and helped him with the derivative. Maya was in her room, painting. She was a whirlwind of creative, chaotic energy, and her talent was breathtaking. She showed me her latest piece, a vibrant, abstract swirl of blues and golds. "It's the feeling you get right before a thunderstorm," she explained. "It's beautiful, sweetie," I said, my throat tight. I wanted to hug her, to tell her to never let anyone dim that light inside her. But all I did was approve of the colors, like a polite stranger. That evening, I packed my life into cardboard boxes. Polite stranger. I took the small framed photos the kids had given me over the years. Finger-painted masterpieces from kindergarten, goofy school pictures, a Polaroid of the 3 of us building a snowman. They were the only things in this house that truly belonged to me. As I carried the last box to my car, I saw the Davenports through the kitchen window. They were sitting down to dinner with the children, laughing at something Richard said. It was a perfect portrait of a happy family, a portrait from which I had been neatly and efficiently erased. They had already moved on. The clean break was already complete. I drove away from the sprawling estate without a single person waving goodbye, feeling like a ghost leaving a house I had only ever been haunting. The 2 years that followed were a study in humility. The sterling letter of recommendation from the Davenports felt like a curse. Families in their affluent circle saw my name and knew my story. I was the nanny the Davenports had outgrown. It was an unspoken social demotion. No one wanted another family's cast-offs. I was forced to take a series of jobs that chipped away at my soul. I was a barista in a soulless coffee chain, a cashier at a 24-hour grocery store, and for 6 miserable months, a telemarketer selling vacation packages. The comfortable apartment over the garage was replaced by a cramped third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where sirens were the local birdsong. The financial cushion of my severance package evaporated with alarming speed, swallowed by rent, bills, and the sheer cost of starting over from scratch. More than the money, I missed the sense of purpose. I missed the sound of Maya's laughter and the intellectual debates with Liam. I felt adrift, a 38-year-old woman whose entire identity had been wrapped up in a family that no longer existed for her. I sent the kids' birthday cards and Christmas presents to the house, but I never received a reply. I assumed Cynthia intercepted them, tossing them in the trash along with the memories of the woman who had raised her children. It was on a rainy Tuesday during a particularly bleak week that I met David. I was huddled in a small independent bookstore, nursing a lukewarm tea and trying to lose myself in a novel. The bookstore was my one sanctuary, a place where no one knew me. A man sat down at the small table across from me. He was unassuming, dressed in a simple gray hoodie and jeans. He had kind eyes, a quiet intensity, and a laptop covered in coding-related stickers. For an hour, we sat in comfortable silence, two strangers sharing a small island of calm in the city's storm. When he finally packed up to leave, he paused by my table. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "But I saw you were reading Jane Eyre. It's my favorite." It was a simple opening, but it was the first genuine, friendly conversation I'd had with a stranger in months. We talked for 20 minutes about books, about the city, about the comforting smell of old paper. He didn't ask what I did for a living, and I didn't offer. He introduced himself as David, a freelance programmer. I told him I was Sarah, and that I was in between things. It became our routine. We'd meet at the bookstore a few times a week. Our conversations grew longer, deeper. He was brilliant, but refreshingly down to earth. He told me he worked from home, building obscure software for a niche market. He was intensely private, preferring quiet evenings and long walks in the park to crowded bars or fancy restaurants. It suited me perfectly. My old life had been lived in the shadow of ostentatious wealth. David's quiet, simple world felt like coming home. He never pried into my past, but one evening, as we walked along the river, I found myself telling him everything. I told him about Liam and Maya, about the 10 years of my life I'd given to the Davenports, and about the brutal, cold dismissal. I expected pity, but instead, he just listened, his expression growing more thoughtful. When I was finished, he stopped and turned to me. "They didn't just lose a nanny, Sarah," he said, his gaze firm. "They lost the best part of their family. Their cruelty doesn't define your worth. It only exposes their lack of it." In that moment, I felt a piece of my fractured self begin to heal. David saw me not as a discarded employee, but as a person of value. Our friendship blossomed into a deep, tender love. He was patient and kind, rebuilding my confidence with a quiet, unwavering belief in me. He celebrated the small victories. When I finally landed a stable job as an administrative assistant at a local nonprofit, he cooked me a gourmet dinner in his surprisingly spacious, minimalist apartment. He never talked much about his finances, but I knew he was comfortable. He called it being lucky with a few projects. It didn't matter to me. For the first time in my life, I was loved for who I was, not for the services I could provide. After a year of dating, he asked me to marry him, not with a grand gesture, but on a quiet Tuesday morning in the same bookstore where we first met, slipping a simple, elegant ring onto my finger. And for the first time in 2 very long years, my future felt brighter than my past. Life with David was a gentle rhythm. He was my anchor, my quiet champion. We were planning a small wedding, something intimate and meaningful, far from the performative society I'd left behind. I was finally finding my footing, healing the old wounds. Then, an email appeared in my inbox that threatened to rip them all open again. The sender was Liam Davenport at eliteprep.edu. My breath caught in my chest. I hadn't heard from him in over 2 years. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Subject: Please, Sarah, I hope this is still your email. I had to guess a few combinations. Mom deleted your contact info from everything. I know it's been a long time. I'm sorry, we were kids, and we didn't know how to stand up to them. But not a week goes by that Maya and I don't talk about you. We miss you so much. The reason I'm writing is the annual garden party for the Davenport Foundation is in 2 weeks. It's the usual nightmare, but this year is a big one. They're honoring some big-shot tech donor who's giving a ton of money. Mom is unbearable. Maya and I want you to come, as our guest. We know it's a crazy thing to ask. We know how they treated you, but we want to see you. We want to talk to you like we should have been able to 2 years ago. We're older now, and we're not afraid of them anymore. Please, Sarah, it would mean the world to us. Liam. I read the email 3 times, a tidal wave of conflicting emotions crashing over me. The raw, painful memories of my dismissal warred with the deep, abiding love I still felt for the children I'd raised. The idea of setting foot on that property again, of seeing Cynthia's smug face, made my stomach clench. I showed the email to David that evening. He read it carefully, his expression unreadable. "What do you think?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He set the phone down and looked at me, his gaze full of the gentle understanding I'd come to rely on. "I think the real question is, what do you want to do, Sarah? You don't owe those people anything. But it sounds like these kids, they still see you as family." He was right. This wasn't about the Davenports. It was about Liam and Maya. They were reaching out, trying to bridge the chasm their parents had created. They were fighting for our connection. How could I ignore that? The pain Cynthia and Richard had caused me was immense, but my love for the kids was stronger. "I want to see them," I said, the decision solidifying in my chest. "But David, I can't go alone. I can't face Cynthia and Richard without you by my side. David, I can't. Would you be willing to walk into the lion's den with me?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I would follow you anywhere, Sarah Jensen, even to a snobby garden party in the suburbs. On one condition." "What's that?" "We get to leave the second it stops being about you and the kids, and we go get pizza." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that eased the knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Deal." The next day, I replied to Liam. I told him I'd be there and that I'd be bringing my fiancé, David. Liam's response was immediate and ecstatic. He said he and Maya would meet us at the gate to make sure there were no issues. The 2 weeks leading up to the party were a blur of anxiety. I bought a simple but elegant blue dress from a department store, a purchase that felt both extravagant and necessary. It was my armor. David was a rock, reassuring me every time my resolve wavered. "You're not the person who left that house 2 years ago," he told me the night before the party, taking my hands in his. "You were their employee then. Now you're going back as a guest, a strong, independent woman who is loved. You hold all the power here, Sarah. Don't ever forget that." His words bolstered me, but as we drove towards the familiar, opulent neighborhood the next day, my heart hammered against my ribs. I was willingly walking back into the place of my greatest humiliation. But this time, I wasn't walking alone. The Davenport estate looked exactly the same, a monument to new money trying desperately to look old. The wrought iron gates, crowned with a golden D, swung open to reveal the long, winding driveway lined with perfectly sculpted hedges. As we pulled up, I saw them waiting near the entrance. Liam and Maya. My breath hitched. Liam was no longer the lanky boy I'd left behind. He was a tall young man, with his father's height, but a kinder set to his jaw. Maya had shed the last of her childhood awkwardness and blossomed into a stunning young woman, her artist's eyes bright and intelligent. The moment I stepped out of the car, Maya rushed forward and threw her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder. "You came," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I can't believe you actually came. Liam was next, his hug just as tight. We've missed you, Sarah. Tears pricked my eyes. I've missed you both more than you can imagine. I introduced them to David, who shook their hands warmly. I saw the relief in their eyes as they took in his easy smile and unassuming demeanor. He wasn't one of their parents' stuffy friends. He was one of us. Thank you for bringing her, Liam said to David, his gratitude sincere. She's the best person I know, David replied simply, and the look he gave me was all the reassurance I needed. Walking into the garden was like stepping back in time. White tents dotted the lawn, a string quartet played softly near the rose bushes, and waiters in crisp uniforms moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and canapes. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and forced laughter. Cynthia and Richard were holding court near the fountain. Cynthia was a vision in a severe white dress, her blonde hair coiffed into a perfect helmet. Her eyes scanned the crowd with the predatory gaze of a hawk, assessing and judging everyone. When she saw me, her perfectly painted smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face before being replaced by a mask of saccharine politeness. She glided over, Richard trailing in her wake like a well-trained dog. "Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "What a surprise. Liam and Maya neglected to mention they had invited you." Her eyes swept over my dress, a subtle but clear dismissal, before landing on David. And you are?" she asked, her tone shifting to one of mild interest, clearly assessing his financial bracket by the cut of his jacket. "This is my fiancé, David Sterling," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Richard shook his hand perfunctorily, my voice steadier. "Sterling, don't believe we've met. What do you do?" "I'm in software," David said vaguely, offering no further details. Cynthia's interest visibly waned. In her world, in software could mean anything from a help desk technician to a struggling app developer. She clearly placed him in one of the lower categories. "How lovely," she said, the words utterly meaningless. "Well, do try to enjoy yourselves." With a final dismissive nod, she turned and swept away, already latching onto a more important-looking guest. The message was clear. You are here on the children's whim, but you do not belong. We spent the next hour with Liam and Maya, catching up in a quiet corner of the garden. They told me about school, their friends, their dreams for college. It felt wonderful, natural, a balm to the wound that had been festering for 2 years. But I could feel the eyes of the other guests on us. I heard the whispers. "Isn't that the old nanny? What is she doing here?" I tried to ignore it, to focus on the children who clearly still loved me. But with every passing minute, the feeling of being an intruder grew stronger. I was a ghost at their feast, a reminder of a past they had paid to erase. And I had a sinking feeling that Cynthia Davenport was not done with me yet. The confrontation came, as I knew it would, when I was at my most vulnerable. Liam and Maya had been pulled away by their father to greet a local politician, and David had gone to get me a glass of water, leaving me alone for a moment near a table laden with desserts. That's when Cynthia made her move. She didn't approach me alone. She came flanked by 2 of her closest friends, women with identical hairstyles and equally predatory smiles. They formed a tight semicircle around me, a deliberate, calculated act of social intimidation. "Sarah, darling," Cynthia began, her voice loud enough for the surrounding guests to turn and listen. "It's so quaint that you're here. I must admit, I was a bit worried it would be awkward for you." Her friends tittered softly. I felt a hot flush of anger and humiliation creep up my neck. I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. "Not at all," I said calmly. "It was kind of Liam and Maya to invite me." "Oh, yes, the children." Cynthia waved a dismissive hand, adorned with a diamond that could have paid off my student loans. "They have such sentimental hearts. A fleeting childhood memory, I suppose." She turned to her friends, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "But you know how it is. They move on so quickly at this age. New schools, new friends, new priorities. She then turned her piercing gaze back to me, and her voice dropped into a tone of feigned sympathy that was more insulting than any shout. Honestly, Sarah, our kids don't even remember you. I'm sure you meant well, but you were just a phase, a service we paid for. They have a real governess now, someone who is preparing them for the world. The words hit me like a physical blow. Don't even remember you. It was a lie. A vicious, calculated lie designed to obliterate a decade of my life, to reduce my love and devotion to a simple transaction. In front of her friends and a dozen other listening guests, she was publicly branding me as insignificant, disposable, forgotten. I saw Liam and Maya across the lawn, looking in our direction with horrified expressions. They had heard her. My heart broke for them, for the position she had put them in. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say? Arguing would only make me look hysterical. Staying silent felt like accepting her verdict. I was trapped, skewered by her malice. One of her friends chimed in, twisting the knife. Cynthia, you're too kind. Most people wouldn't have the courage to be so honest with former staff. Well, I believe in clarity, Cynthia said, her smile widening. She had won. She had publicly re-established the hierarchy, putting the help back in her place. She was about to deliver what was clearly meant to be the final killing blow when a calm, quiet voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here, Cynthia? It was David. He had returned, holding 2 glasses of water. He stood beside me, his presence a solid, reassuring wall. He didn't touch me, but I could feel his strength, his quiet fury. Cynthia's expression tightened. She hadn't counted on him. David, isn't it? No problem at all. Just a little trip down memory lane with Sarah. I was just explaining how the children have moved on. David looked from Cynthia's smug face to my pale one. He took a slow sip of water, his eyes never leaving hers. A subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere. His quiet confidence was unnerving her. I see, he said, his voice level and dangerously calm. Well, if you'll excuse us, my fiancé and I have some catching up to do with her family. He put a deliberate emphasis on the last 2 words, then gently took my arm. Come on, Sarah. Let's get some air. As he led me away, the crowd of onlookers parted, their whispers following us. Cynthia was left standing there, her victory soured. She had tried to humiliate me, to erase me, but David's simple, powerful act of solidarity had turned the tables. He had stood with me, claimed me, and in doing so, had shown everyone that I was not alone and I was not forgotten. But the battle was far from over. Richard was now stepping up to the small stage at the center of the lawn, a microphone in his hand, ready to introduce the party's main event. Richard Davenport tapped the microphone, the sound echoing across the suddenly quiet lawn. He beamed at the crowd, a man entirely at home in the spotlight. Welcome, friends, colleagues, and supporters of the Davenport Foundation, he began, his voice booming with practiced charisma. Thank you all for being here today. As you know, our foundation is dedicated to providing opportunities for underprivileged youth, and this year, we are poised to make our biggest impact yet. David and I had found a spot near the back, partially shielded by a large oak tree. I was still shaken, my hands trembling slightly. David gently took one of them in his grip firm and steadying. Are you okay? He murmured. I will be, I whispered back. Thank you. On stage, Richard was in full swing. This is all possible thanks to the unprecedented generosity of one man. A man who has revolutionized the tech industry. A true visionary whose work has changed the way we all live. He is famously private, a man who lets his actions speak louder than his words. And today, his actions are speaking volumes. A ripple of excited murmuring went through the crowd. Cynthia stood beside the stage, looking positively radiant, preening as if she herself were responsible for this grand donation. She was basking in the reflected glory of a man she hadn't even met. He is committed to a donation that will not only fund our scholarship program for the next decade, but will allow us to build a brand new educational center in the heart of the city, Richard announced, pausing for dramatic effect. The crowd gasped, then broke into enthusiastic applause. It is my distinct honor, Richard continued, his voice swelling with importance, to introduce our guest of honor, a titan of industry and a great philanthropist, Mr. David Sterling. My blood ran cold. The name hit me like a physical shock. David. Sterling. My David. My quiet, unassuming programmer in a gray hoodie. The man who said he was lucky with a few projects. All eyes in the crowd turned, searching. Richard and Cynthia scanned the faces, their smiles wide, waiting for the great man to reveal himself. David squeezed my hand once, a silent message of "trust me," and then he let go. He walked out from behind the tree and started toward the stage. A wave of confusion rippled through the guests. People turned to each other, whispering, "Is that him? The guy with the nanny?" I watched, frozen in disbelief, as David walked calmly through the parted crowd. He looked completely out of place in his simple, dark sports coat amidst the sea of designer suits. Yet he commanded the space with an effortless authority I had never seen before. He reached the stage and shook Richard's stunned, outstretched hand. Richard's jaw was practically on the floor. He looked from David to me and back again, the cogs in his brain slowly, painfully grinding into place. But it was Cynthia's face that I will never forget. Her triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Her face went ashen, her eyes wide with panicked disbelief. The man she had dismissed as a nobody, the fiancé of the nanny she had just publicly humiliated, was the reclusive tech billionaire she had been fawning over for weeks. David took the microphone from a dumbstruck Richard. He stood for a moment, his calm gaze sweeping over the silent, staring crowd. His eyes found mine, and in them I saw an apology, an explanation, and a promise, all in a single look. "Thank you, Richard," David said, his voice clear and steady, amplified across the manicured lawn. "It's true, I prefer to stay out of the spotlight, but I felt it was important to be here today, not just to talk about this donation, but to talk about what truly inspired it." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. Cynthia looked like she was about to be physically ill. The trap she had so carefully laid for me had just snapped shut on her instead. And David Sterling, my David, was about to make sure it cut deep. "For the past year," David began, his voice resonating with a quiet power that held every single guest captive, "I've had the privilege of getting to know the most extraordinary woman I have ever met. A woman of immense integrity, compassion, and strength." He looked directly at me, a soft smile gracing his lips. Across the lawn, I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes shifting from him to me. I was no longer an invisible ghost. I was the center of the story. "This woman spent 10 years of her life in this very house," David continued, his gaze now sweeping over Richard and Cynthia, who stood frozen by the side of the stage. "She dedicated herself to raising 2 wonderful children, Liam and Maya. She wasn't just an employee. She was their teacher, their confidant, their fiercest protector, and their most devoted friend. She poured her heart and soul into helping shape them into the incredible young adults they are today." He let those words sink in. He was telling my story, the one Cynthia had tried so hard to erase, and he was telling it to everyone. "That is why I am so pleased to make the initial $10 million donation to the Davenport Foundation," he announced. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Cynthia's face twitched, a bizarre mix of horror at her own situation and greed at the sum of money. She was trapped. "But," David added, and the word hung in the air like a guillotine, "that's not my main announcement today." He turned his full attention to the Davenports. "My conversations with your foundation have been enlightening, but they also made me realize something. Philanthropy isn't just about writing checks to established organizations. It's about identifying a real need and empowering the right people to fill it. It's about investing in people with first-hand experience, people who understand that nurturing a child's potential is the most important work there is." He looked back out at the crowd, then his eyes landed on me again. warm and full of love. That is why the bulk of my philanthropic efforts will now be focused on a new endeavor. This morning, my lawyers finalized the paperwork for a new national nonprofit, the Jensen Sterling Foundation for Educational Access. My own name, Jensen. He was putting my name right beside his. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the faces of the stunned crowd. Our foundation, David declared, his voice ringing with conviction, will be endowed with an initial fund of $500 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence born of pure shock. 500 million. It was a figure so astronomical, it dwarfed everything the Davenport Foundation had ever accomplished. And there is only one person in the world with the experience, the passion, and the integrity to lead this organization, David said, his voice softening as he delivered the final, devastating blow to Cynthia's world. It is my great honor to announce our engagement and to introduce the founding executive director of the Jensen Sterling Foundation, my fiancée, Sarah Jensen. He held his hand out to me. The world seemed to move in slow motion as I walked toward the stage, my simple blue dress suddenly feeling like a suit of armor. The crowd parted for me as if I were royalty. As I stepped onto the stage, David took my hand and raised it to his lips, a gesture of profound respect in front of everyone who had ever dismissed me. He handed me the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces, shocked, intrigued, envious. Then I looked at Cynthia. Her face was a ruin of collapsed pride and seething fury. Her perfectly constructed world had been demolished in under 5 minutes. She hadn't just been silenced. She had been rendered utterly and completely insignificant. I looked at Liam and Maya, who were standing together, their faces shining with tears of joy and vindication for me. For us. Thank you, I said, my voice shaking only slightly. I believe deeply that every child deserves a champion. For a long time, my world was very small, and my focus was on 2 of them. Now, thanks to David, I have the chance to be a champion for thousands more. I can't wait to get started. I had found my voice, and everyone was finally listening. The party did not so much end as it did disintegrate. As David and I walked off the stage, hand in hand, we were swarmed. People who had looked through me an hour earlier were now desperate to shake my hand, to congratulate me, to press their business cards into my palm. It was a dizzying, transparent display of opportunism, and we navigated through it as quickly as we could. Our only goal was to find Liam and Maya. They met us by the oak tree, their faces alight with a fierce, protective joy. That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen, Liam said, shaking David's hand with genuine admiration. Maya just hugged me again, tightly. She deserved it, Sarah. Mom, she deserved all of it. There was a sadness in her voice, the pain of a daughter seeing her mother's true, ugly nature laid bare for all to see. We're leaving, I told them. This isn't our world. It's not ours either, Liam said, a newfound resolve in his voice. Not anymore. As we walked toward the exit, we passed the fountain. Richard and Cynthia were standing there, completely isolated. Their guests gave them a wide berth, whispering as they hurried past. Their social circle, built on a fragile foundation of wealth and influence, was already cracking. Richard looked broken, a man who had just seen his biggest prize snatched away and handed to his former nanny. But Cynthia's face was contorted with a rage so pure it was terrifying. As I passed, her voice, a venomous hiss, cut through the air. You think you've won, you little charity case? I stopped and turned to face her one last time. David's hand tightened on mine, but he remained silent. This was my moment. This was never about winning, Cynthia, I said, my voice calm and clear. It was about worth. You thought my worth was determined by my job title and your approval. You were wrong. My worth comes from the love I give and the integrity I live by, something you wouldn't understand. I didn't wait for a reply. We turned and walked away, leaving her to choke on her own poison. The consequences for the Davenports were swift and brutal. The story of Cynthia's cruelty and David's spectacular rebuttal became the talk of the town, spreading through the city's elite like wildfire. It was a tale of hubris and comeuppance, too delicious not to share. But the punishment went far beyond social embarrassment. David, it turned out, was not just a tech billionaire. He was the tech billionaire. His company, Sterling Dynamics, was a giant whose influence touched nearly every sector of the economy. Richard Davenport's consulting firm had several major contracts with subsidiaries of Sterling Dynamics. Within a week, all of those contracts were terminated, citing a re-evaluation of partner ethics. The news sent shockwaves through Richard's company. His top partners, having witnessed the garden party disaster firsthand, saw the writing on the wall. They initiated a vote of no confidence, and Richard was forced out of the company he had built. His financial ruin was as public and humiliating as my vindication had been. The cruelest blow, however, came from their own children. A month after the party, Liam and Maya, now 18 and 16, made a decision. They applied for summer internships at the newly opened Jensen Sterling Foundation. They wanted to work with me. They chose my world of purpose over their parents' world of empty prestige. For Cynthia, who saw her children as extensions of her own ambition, their public defection was the ultimate punishment. She had lost her status, her husband's fortune, and now, the very children she had used as pawns in her cruel game. My life, in contrast, bloomed. The work was challenging and deeply fulfilling. I spent my days building a team, designing programs, and finding new ways to provide children with the opportunities they deserved. David was my partner in every sense of the word, his quiet belief in me a constant source of strength. We had our pizza, and we got married in that little bookstore, surrounded by a small group of people who truly loved us, including a proud Liam and Maya. One evening, months later, David and I were looking over architectural plans for the first school our foundation was building. He pointed to the cornerstone on the blueprint. "What should we have them carve here?" he asked. I smiled, thinking of the long, painful journey from the nanny's apartment to this incredible new reality. "How about this?" I said. "The true measure of a person is not who they are in the spotlight, but how they treat those in the shadows." He wrapped his arms around me, his love a warm, protective embrace. I was no longer in the shadows. I had found my own light, and it was brighter than I had ever dared to imagine.